This episode is brought to you by Encore Business Group, Ericola Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Williams Chiropractic, Elite Winning Solutions, and Sal's Complete Home Painting and Handyman Services. Shayne Graham's Extra Points with Ron Walsh airs live Thursdays, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern on Jethro.fm.
Thanks for joining us on National Optimist Day and National Nutella Day. I always throw these food ones at Shayne, and it's always foods that he doesn't eat. It's not like National Steak Day or National Chicken Day or National Protein Day. It's always the cheat stuff. So I can't see you eating a lot of Nutella, Shayne.
Well, I can tell you that I have. If it's a day that I feel like I'm okay to do some certain things, I do enjoy Nutella because it's not too strong. It's not too whatever. It's mild enough, I guess. When you're in Canada, I think it's on everything. But, growing up, I never even heard of it until I was probably a teenager.
I don't think I heard of it until I lived in Spain when I was in my 20s, actually, because it is more popular overseas, or was at that time. But I'm curious. We've got our first guest on the line already, and we're excited about this guest. It's somebody that will be able to talk kicking here with Shayne, because I'm a very poor replacement and representation of that. I'm just a wall that he bounces things off of. But we've got a fellow kicker and an active kicker, one that all the Michigan fans will remember. So Jake Moody's on the line. And I'm curious, Jake, because we always do the question of the day. I've been reading about some of your breakfast habits. Do you partake in any Nutella here?
I do enjoy Nutella on certain sweet breakfast items, like Nutella on like French toast, or maybe like on pancakes and stuff. But I can't say, I have a jar at the house or anything like that. But I do enjoy it, out at a restaurant. If I see something on the menu with Nutella, I usually like that for kind of a sweeter item.
That's a good combination with it. That's what I was going to ask, is if you had an item that you liked on it, because I was in my research for the interview, I was reading that you also had a breakfast that you were kind of superstitious about, that you used to have. I don't know if you still do, but you used to have consistently to make sure everything was in full swing for you, make sure you had everything going your direction.
Yep, I used to be very superstitious. From the time that I woke up for a game to, what time I would shower in the morning and what I had to eat for breakfast, it was the exact same before every single game. And it got to the point where it was getting a little too much, so I kind of strayed away from it. So I'm not, super, I guess, uptight before games. But, it was scrambled eggs, 2 slices of bacon, hash browns, and some fruit, and it was the exact same thing every single time, but I stopped doing that recently, and I'm just kind of, trying to have a little bit more of a chill morning before a game.
Shayne, you're nodding your head here. You're very tradition driven as well,
yes.
As far as like you like to keep the habits, and we've talked about how you pack your bag and all of those kinds of things, all these habits. Did you have something like that when you played?
So I never saw myself as superstitious. Maybe I was just a little stitious, but
Office reference, I like it.
Yeah, right. But I feel like I was very routine based, and I think for me routine is a very big thing. The problem with superstition is if you miss something, it creates a negative feeling, and that's where where psychology is such a big thing with me. I never wanted to accidentally give myself a negative feeling because I did something slightly off of my superstitious routine or whatever, so or ritual, I guess you can call it. I found that I would literally break my habits as long as they were productive in the way I broke them, just so I would not depend on it, so that when I ever did have certain things that went off that line or off the tracks, I didn't panic because things fell off the tracks. I just got myself back in my groove, so I felt like it wasn't something that I was going to have to dwell on because I didn't have the scrambled eggs and the 2 eggs and the and the hash browns and the fruit. It was, you know what? Today I'm going to have 6 pieces of egg or 6 pieces of bacon, and I eat a lot of bacon and sausage and a lot of eggs. I probably eat at least 8 to 10 eggs a day now. But I always made sure I never got stuck in a rut, that I just never felt like I was dependent on that.
See, that's what we need. We need like National Bacon Day for one of our shows. Hopefully we'll have that coming up.
I'm sure it's a thing.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you see some of these days and they're a little out of control. But Jake, when did you actually break that habit, and how was that transition from kind of, okay, like Shayne was saying, you kind of got out of a routine that you were in for a long time. Was there a mental struggle at the beginning when you first went away from that habit?
Kind of as Shayne alluded to, it got to the point where if, some small little thing was off in my pregame routine, those negative thoughts would start to creep in, like, oh my gosh, I didn't start my shower at 7:30 a.m. this morning. Now I'm going to have a bad game. So it was actually this year that I, started to kind of stray away from it, and just kind of went to more of like a relaxed, just normal morning, treat it kind of as any other morning, and not making it this big, hyped up pre-game routine that, I used to have. So I feel like, at first it was a little weird, and it was like, oh no, if I stray off my routine, am I going to struggle? But thankfully, this year I was on the practice squad in Chicago for a little bit, so I got some time to kind of, do a more relaxed morning routine without having to worry about playing a game that day. So that was kind of a good transition, going from the super, scheduled routine to just kind of more of a relaxed, chill, normal morning.
I was wondering if it coincided with the movement that you've had this year, because obviously you've bounced around a little bit, and I was curious if that was kind of like, okay, I'm gonna kind of ease my way into this. I'm gonna lean into this and say, okay, I'm gonna change up my routine in hopes to kind of have different results and kind of take some control back and say, hey, no, I've got control over this situation. I can do this. I can make a comeback. I can be a premier player at my position, and I know that, and you kind of then hone some of those things and change things up as you kind of see different circumstances.
Yeah, I think it helped me this year. Definitely did a few things. I changed my steps on my approach to the ball this year. Changed, my pregame routine up a little bit, just made it a little bit more relaxed. And, it's definitely a little scary going, especially in the NFL, changing things when stuff has been working for you. But that's all it is, really, is just trying to fine-tune things, tweak things, try to get that 1% better, whether it's with the actual kicking or with taking care of your body, your nutrition, all that good stuff. So it was definitely taking a little bit of a risk, but I feel like it paid off in the end.
Well, one thing I can tell you, obviously, you know how proud I've been of you over the years. I recruited Jake when I was a coach at Central Michigan, and he was at Northville High School. I recruited him. I don't know how close I came to getting him, but I thought I had a chance, but Michigan obviously got him, and it worked out well. But honestly, stayed in touch with him over the years. And, one thing I can say is that the experience I had, I thought I was on top of the world at one point, and all of a sudden the rug was pulled out from under me. I had to learn how to adapt. I had to learn how to create different file folders for different routines, for different situations, because situations aren't always going to be the same. I even took out my jab step. If you're not a kicker, you may not know what that means. I had a jab step in my kick, which is kind of like this little leading step where you just kind of lead with your front foot to kind of build your momentum a little bit. I took it out in the third game of the season, finished the season really strong. A lot of guys were like, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. I did it anyway. finished the year really strong after doing that. And it was just a matter of how many times can I rep this movement to get it as flawless as I can on game day. I believe you did something similar.
Yep, I got rid of the jab step. I felt like it was getting a little bit inconsistent. Sometimes it would be 10 inches. Other times it would be maybe closer to 12 to 13 inches. Just in game time, you get a little bit excited.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of, got the juices flowing. So sometimes you take a little bit bigger of a step. And so I felt like, to kind of reduce any inconsistencies in my approach, might as well just take out the entire step because I didn't need the extra momentum necessarily for distance or anything like that. So I felt like it would be beneficial in the long run to switch to being a two-step approach kicker.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, obviously, I could geek out on this all day. I won't do it.
Keep going.
I had a conversation a while back saying, hey, I'd like to get it a little smaller. It would create less of a lunge. Your hips won't sink as much in your initial approach, blah, blah, blah. We all have our comfort zones. We all have been doing things for such a long time. It's really hard to just change those things up. So whether that was, I remember you shortened it at one point, and then obviously you felt like you needed more because when the adrenaline's pumping, sometimes we tend to step a little bit more instead of letting ourselves naturally fall forward. Taking that step out, I think, was a good move. I'm glad you were self-aware enough to do it because I think it's definitely going to make you more consistent. Whether you feel like you need that extra momentum or not, okay, Jake has one of the strongest legs in the NFL. He's very if you look at what TrackMan gives data on ball velocity when you hit the ball, trajectory, all that, most guys in the NFL average around 71, 72 miles per hour. Jake is up there in the 74 to 77 range, depending on weather, ball, all that kind of stuff. But so the need for that extra strength, our mind will play tricks on us. And sometimes it's in a big situation. Sometimes it's a distance situation. Or it can play tricks on us when we feel it's a short situation, so we step a little softer. But we always want to make sure we're in the same tempo, the same movement. We don't do anything more or less. And I think getting rid of that little movement is going to be a good thing. And if you ever decide to bring it back, you almost can figure out a way to just lift it and put it back down in the same spot. That's kind of what I did because I brought mine back at one point and finished my career with a jab step, but it was really just a lift of the foot and put it back down without really stepping forward. So that can always be something if you feel like you don't like the snap hold operation isn't quite as smooth as you like it. That's something that I did that gave me a little more confidence that I felt like I could time up that operation a little bit better when I didn't have a ton of confidence in it.
Shayne, is that something where it kind of, that you guys were alluding to kind of the power exchange with that? I was going to mention that because Jake's always had a very good distance kick, clearly, even from kind of the layman perspective. But is that a bit of a trade between distance and accuracy? Are you hoping to gain some accuracy with kind of removing that jab step?
Well, it's a funny thing because we talk about consistency in our alignment and our steps and certain things. And when you see these kickers walk backwards from the spot, step sideways, then they position their body a certain way, then they're set, they're ready to go, kind of like a batter getting in the batter's box. There's like a time when they're ready to go. That jab step, you have a fixed distance. You have from point A to point B, and it's usually within about a half an inch every time. Like, it's pretty dang close with guys who do a really good job of detail. Well, when you actually step harder, thinking that you're going to get more power, you're actually shortening your last two steps where the power actually comes from. So, so you're technically not even giving yourself the power you think you're giving, and you're shortening the movement that your body has to create this range of movement, trifecta of backswing, forward swing, and follow through. And trying to minimize as many pieces of those gears turning as possible is what creates the most efficient machine. I mean, there's a reason why a Swiss-made watch, if you open them up, and they're thousands and thousands of dollars, they have all these tiny little gears working inside of them. And then you get a watch that's a Timex or whatever, and it's like you open it, and there's like one circuit board and a little a digital quartz display. Which one actually keeps better time? The Timex.
Right.
Okay.
It doesn't have as many things that can go wrong.
It doesn't have as many things that can go wrong and have to keep moving and all of that kind of stuff. So when it comes to a very individualized, a golfer, a kicker, a punter, even a batter sometimes, you have to understand the most amount of moving parts I can take out of the equation, the least amount of mistakes I'm going to make in my movement. And I think Jake's done a great job of that and will continue to as he learns more, experiences more, starts to get the feelings of the ups and the downs that were kind of new over these first couple years, and they're going to start becoming normal.
Well, we talk about that some on the show, Jake. Shayne talks about the growth versus peak mindset, and you're a guy that, I mean, you've excelled your entire life at this. You were very highly recruited, as Shayne mentioned. I am curious, I'm probably going to ask you that at some point about your recruiting process, but obviously you can't regret what happened at Michigan. That was a great career that you had there, and then drafted into the NFL, came in very highly touted. But as Shayne has mentioned, with his career and bounce around a little bit, you have to kind of learn different things, and it's a very mental game. And so it's got to be tough to adjust from, okay, yeah, I'm top of my position, top of my sport, top of everything, to, okay, I've got to tweak some things, but you started up top and clearly you're returning there. So I feel like you might end up even further ahead eventually because you learned some of those things in advance. And I'm getting nods from Shayne here that you'll advance yourself because you did hit a little bit of a challenge, but now you're rising above it.
Yeah. The first, few times I, faced some adversity in the NFL, it felt like the world was ending. It felt, unfamiliar. It was definitely a challenge and a struggle to try to navigate that and try to get through it. But looking back now, I think it was probably one of the best things that could have happened to me. Was facing some adversity, facing some struggles, and learning how to kind of dig yourself out of it. Because everybody's going to face it at some point in the NFL. There's no avoiding it. The so-called GOATs of kicking, and they've all hit ruts. They've all had bad games. It happens. So kind of being able to figure it out, for the first time, kind of navigate through that and learning how to come out the other side better and not letting it, affect the next game or the next kick. I feel like that's a very valuable skill to have in the NFL, and it's probably the only skill that you can have if you want to survive, is to just learn how to move on, have that next kick mentality, kind of have more of a process over outcome mindset. And yeah, I feel like for me personally, the best thing that could have happened for my career was kind of hitting a few rough patches.
It's funny, a lot of people who talk about my career and they saw that I had a lot of years of success in Cincinnati and really didn't have a ton of failure. I did, but I had a lot of struggle to go to, not making a team, not being re-signed to a team, moving around here to there, here to there, here to there. I think those struggles ultimately shaped me to, one, thicken my skin so that I could handle more things, but also, it's kind of like when I train guys, and I have guys out on the field, and we're going to kick 25 field goals. First thing is I don't let them start close and work their way back. I make them start backwards, start deep once they're warm, and then deep, short, middle, middle, deep, middle, short, middle, deep, 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 middle. Like I make it very random because that's what you're going to get in a game. So I don't believe in the full like start up close, work your way back thing. Another thing is when it's your last kick, if you hit the upright and you miss it, or you miss it wide right, or you miss it wide left, you're done. There is no such thing as end on a make. I don't believe in that. I will actually call people out for it because I think that just tries to give guys this warm, fuzzy feeling that you think you're helping their confidence, but what you're doing is you're actually weakening them because now they never learn to deal with walking off the field without those warm, fuzzy feelings. So when we get in a game and we miss a kick, we have to learn how to deal with that feeling. Or we have a bad game, we have to know how to deal with that feeling, and we don't have that opportunity to have somebody, take one more. Let's end on a make. Take one more. Like I always hate it when the head coach does that at the end of a field goal period during practice because I'm like, no, I wouldn't say it if I was playing. I'd do whatever he asked me to do. But when I was coaching and the head coach would want that, I would wait till practice was over and say, Coach, every time you do that, you're enabling him to stay in the same position he's in. He'll never get better if you don't let him feel that feeling of walking off the field disappointed. You have to let him get over that feeling. And that's a big thing with me.
Well, they say practice like you play. That's a little different when you're a kicker because practicing, it's not contact. You have to simulate game situations. And that's occurring to me in this conversation with you and Jake about how you're not insulated at all. In all the other positions, if you play defensive tackle, offensive line,
you're
whatever,
insulated with repetition and multiple chances.
Exactly. Maybe you get demoted from a lead role and then you're a backup, you're a rotation guy if you're not really hitting your mark. If you're a kicker, there's nowhere else to go. The teams don't usually carry two kickers unless there's an injury situation in the pros.
And practice squad has become a fairly new thing for kickers because we didn't used to have that many roster spots, and COVID kind of made that a thing. So you see it a little bit more often now, but it used to be you were the starter or you were on the couch watching on TV.
It's got to be hard to stay ready. I know you were in that situation, Jake, where you were on the practice squad, as you mentioned. That had to help you kind of ease back in and be able to kind of stay ready rather than have to get ready.
Yeah, it was definitely nice. Like Shayne mentioned, it used to kind of be you're either on the couch or you're on the field on Sundays. So kind of being in that middle ground of, you're not necessarily playing on the Sunday, but you're still practicing with the team throughout the week. I kind of treated it as, a good time to actually work on technique stuff and, not be so worried about having to perform at a high level on the weekend. I was able to kind of do some swing tweaks, kind of work some stuff out without having to worry about, will this affect my performance on game days? So I feel like it was pretty helpful to kind of have that situation. Whereas if you're on the couch, you're totally disconnected from everything. It can be kind of tough once you're getting thrown back into the fire. But I feel like being on the practice squad was kind of that nice middle ground for me.
Well, that's why we like to do these segments, because I think the average fan looks at you guys and says, "Oh, well, they have it easy. They're highly paid. They're top of their field. They're top of their position." But I don't think people really dig far enough down to understand the adversity that goes into this and the fact of how much you have to hone your minds, bodies, all of that to be able to achieve what you're doing. So we appreciate you coming on the show and kind of discussing that with us, and we're glad that you're able to get back. We'll be following you. All the Michigan fans are rooting for you here for sure. Shayne, do you have any final words of advice or encouragement for Jake here?
Well, I mean, we talk a good bit. I don't need to throw a whole lot at him because he's heard a lot of what I've had to say. Now he's missed a lot because I don't spend a ton of time with him in these off seasons or anything like that, but I think, since day one, when I was watching his film and I was told, like, hey, take a look at this guy, and I'm like, oh, sure, let me take a look. Oh, okay. And then I think his first game of his senior year, he kicks a 58-yarder. Was it a 58 or a 60 in your first game?
57.
57.
58 came later on in the year.
Okay. And I'm like, we hadn't offered him yet. And I'm like, what are you waiting on? And they're like, well, we like to bring them in and let them prove themselves and earn. I'm like, listen, if you don't offer this guy, you know how dumb you're going to look if he goes somewhere. And even at that, the world of kicking is so crazy that you can be the best kicker in the world, but if a head coach doesn't physically see you do it, sometimes they just won't offer, and it creates a really weird dynamic of you have to be the best guy at their camp on that day, and it can work out really weird sometimes. But I know Jake is going to do amazing. He's got a long career ahead of him. He knows I'm a resource anytime he needs it, and I'm wishing you the best, brother. And just make sure that anything you need, always reach out to me, okay?
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Was he close to getting you? Was he close to getting you, Jake?
Yeah, believe it or not, I mean, no disrespect to Central Michigan, but, you're choosing between the University of Michigan and Central Michigan. It's, it seems like a no-brainer, but it was pretty much 50-50 at one point. Had Shane been able to guarantee he would stay there,
that's the thing.
For the 4 years that I'd be there, maybe I'd feel a little bit more comfortable. But in the end, I feel like I made the right decision. I grew up a Michigan fan, but he was definitely close to getting me to go there, and he was the main reason why I even considered it.
Well, given the points record and the Groza awards, I think he probably made a good decision, huh, Shane?
Yeah, I think it worked out well, and honestly, I'd have felt guilty if he'd have gone. Now, I know he would have done fine because we've all seen Hoosiers, okay? Goalposts are 10 feet high, uprights are 18 feet apart. A field's a field, right? He would have still been recognized as one of the best kickers in the country, if not the best either way. And who knows, maybe he would have transferred and gone, whatever would have happened. But, yeah, I was gone in a year. I went to Michigan State for 2 years, and then I was at Florida for 2 years. So, I wouldn't have even been his coach if he had come there.
And now you're still advising him, so that's great. And you got the relationship, and it's all working out. But thanks for joining the show, Jake. Really appreciate the conversation. We're rooting for you here, and we're looking forward to following your long career, as Shane mentioned.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Have a great time.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Jake. Take care.
Yep, you too.
All right, thanks to Jake Moody. A fun segment there, talking kicking. We're going to have a lot of kicking talk, I think, this episode, because we're going to also have Jake Grossman on, who does some analytics stuff. And so Shane doesn't know this, but I told him, hey, you got to prepare some kicking stuff. You're going on a show with Shayne Graham. We need some kicking metrics. So we'll talk to him in a bit, but we'll take a break and regroup here in studio. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. What'd you think of that kicker talk? It's good stuff, huh?
I was very enthralled. It was I loved it. Just listening to the way they went about their business while changing. To me, it was kind of surprising. Like, we'll change our whole step. We'll take the step out in the middle of a season and stuff like that. To me, that was very fascinating.
It's a position that's built on such repetition, but you still need to make your tweaks eventually too, because Shane talks about that for different weather situations and distance and all of that. So it's an interesting field. I think people look at it and try to oversimplify it, which as you know, on my shows, Jeff, we try not to oversimplify things. We try to actually go further in depth, and this will be a pretty good in-depth episode overall, because we got Jake Grossman coming on in a little bit. He'll cover some analytics stuff with us, and like I said, hopefully some kicking stuff. I don't know what he has for us there, but he has some kicking analytics, so that's going to be another one, Shane, that I feel like you guys are going to be able to kind of go back and forth, because I told him, I said, Shane has stuff that he keeps track of from an analytics standpoint too, not necessarily in a PFF sense, but in your analysis of kickers in your coaching school, you have a whole a metric and format as well.
Yeah, there's always been, especially situational things. I think a lot of teams actually bought into this analytics program that's out there. There's a company that actually they call the book, and each team has a guy who's the analytics guy, and they'll flip through the pages for situations, and they're earmarked, and it'll say on this down, on this yard line, with this many yards for a first down, is it better to go for it? Is it better to kick the field goal, to punt, to whatever it may be? There's all kinds of situations that, I had learned over the years in the NFL, and it just kind of seemed like common sense to me, but it kind of played out to where they were talking about these things. So I kind of got to geek out with the guy that was in town kind of selling us on the book. And then when we actually bought the program, I forget how much it cost. It was expensive. They actually had the service, and they updated it every single week with weather updates and weather forecasts and injury reports and field condition reports, and everything played into how they did the analytics for that. But then you have the straight up, PFF, grading reports and all that. So I learned how to use Excel very fast when I became a coach, because I had never even heard of it until I got out of playing.
That's why we like to have guys like Jake on the show, because the analytics part, I think some football fans can kind of eschew that to a degree and say, well, I like it when my coach goes with their gut, and they just go for it, and they feel that. And obviously we have a coach here in Michigan, Dan Campbell, that has a tendency to do that, but I don't think people understand how much he actually looks at the analytics as well, and at least understands them. He might go I'm having a problem with that word here, by situation here, but he also understands the analytics going into the game and understands that he needs to factor that in. And maybe he says, yeah, I got a good play for this situation and I'm going to be able to go for it. But he knows the analytics in advance, Jeff. And I know we've talked about some of his aggressiveness in the show before, but he knows the analytics and factors that in with the quote unquote gut feeling.
Yeah. And with the percentages that it came down at the end of the year, he seemed to back off a little bit. You notice that the last game in Chicago, he was taking the points where you would thought, I think he got into the percentages seemed to get into his head. It was lower percentages that he had because he had a different team, a stronger offensive line. That seemed to play a part towards the end of the year. He's, use that kicker. Use him. I mean, we've got one of the best, right?
Exactly. That's one thing. I don't think we've discussed that with Shayne much. That's one thing that I do think has factored in. We've talked about it on the shows prior to having the show with Shayne, that I think previously when Campbell was going for it, when they were kind of having more tryout kickers that weren't there for a longer time, that was part of the equation for him. But once you have Jake Bates in the mix and you can trust his leg, I feel like at that point it changes the math a little bit, Shayne. I don't know how that factors into the analytics side, but it changes the math when you've got a kicker that has leg and accuracy, and you can have a little bit more trust. No offense to the Riley Pattersons of the world and the folks that came before Jake, but you have a little bit more trust in a guy like Jake that's got the distance, kind of like Jake Moody, who we just talked to.
Yeah, and that's something that definitely plays into it. I mean, knowing what yard line the offense has to get to feel like they can get a high percentage point on the board versus, okay, we have to punt or go for it until we get to the 33-yard line. But with this guy, we can get to the 37 or the 40-yard line, and we can kick a 58-yarder or a 60-yarder versus a guy who can only kick a 52, 53-yarder. So that obviously plays into it. It plays into the aggressiveness of the play calling, especially when you get into overtime, when you get into, time crunches, anything like that. It plays a big part in a coach's confidence and ability to let loose a little bit versus feeling like they have to be either desperate or uptight because they have limitations. And
now they're adding some folks in that were pretty high on that aggression scale too. Kafka when he was on the Giants, he was pretty high on that list, and then Petzing kind of vacillates back and forth. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with those three in the mix here, and we'll be talking more Lions, I think, later in the show. But we'll take a quick break to catch that one up. Wanted to make sure to give Jake a lot of time in the first segment, so stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. And I'm glad we were talking about this because I wanted to talk about it with Shayne. Jeff brought it up in the break. It just seems like with some of these things going on, Jake Moody obviously is somebody near and dear to the hearts of a lot of Michigan fans here. He grew up in Michigan, as Shayne mentioned, and obviously a great kicker. I mean, Shayne's opinion is about a million times more valid on that than mine is, but I think that's pretty clear by his background, by what he did at Michigan, and the draft position and all of that. But it does seem like with the kickers, especially because there isn't any insulation, these teams do move on from them fairly fast. I'm curious on your take on how to deal with that, Shayne. Obviously, you dealt with it some in your career, and some of it is, okay, we got a guy and we're bringing in a guy because he's injured. That's not really the situation I'm talking about. It's more the situation that Jake was in at the 49ers, where he's a good kicker. You spend a draft pick on him. He's clearly talented, but kickers can go through some of these challenges like we were talking about. But it's got to be tough for these teams to kind of decide when to pull the trigger on, okay, we're getting some missed field goals here, missed extra points. We've got to figure out a solution because we can't really keep two kickers on our team unless there's the practice squad situation that we talked about.
Well, one thing I think you'll notice across the board is it's not just kickers that are getting, short leashes these days. I mean, how often were head coaches getting fired in the 80s and 90s? Not that often.
Not nearly as often as now, that's for sure.
You don't, even in college football, Frank Beamer at Virginia Tech was there for 28 years, I think. You just don't see that anymore. The Bobby Bowdens, the guys that stay at one school for forever, and maybe they have a few down years, or maybe they started out down. Some of these coaches that became legends at their schools didn't have very strong starts, but if it was today, they'd have been out in 2 years. NFL, same thing. I mean, look Cleveland. Every year it seems like they've got a new head coach. And, there's a whole lot of CYA involved in that. So there's a lot of guys that think, if I don't cover my butt, I'm going to get fired. So if I feel any discontent, I'm going to pull the trigger right now so it looks like I'm doing my job. And I think that's what you end up having is general managers and head coaches pull the trigger really quick because it's a quick, easy scapegoat. I hate to say it, but it's a quick, easy scapegoat. You have a lot of money tied up in your starting quarterback and he's not playing well. You usually give him a little longer leash because of the investment you have in that guy. But the kicker usually ends up being a scapegoat because it's a very fundamental black and white. He's missed a couple kicks. He's missed a few kicks. We got to get somebody who can make kicks. Well, guess what? That guy may end up going somewhere else and being all pro for 5 years. And I've seen it happen over and over.
I'm wondering if that's going to be the situation with Jake because, I mean, he has bounced around a little bit now, and we talked about the challenges with him, but correct me if I'm wrong, your opinion is obviously much more valuable on this, but he seems like the type of guy that now that he's found his footing, no pun intended, he's able to maybe catch on with a team where some of these other teams that didn't give him maybe the full audition that he could have used and deserved, they might be kicking themselves because we've talked about who I think it was the Eagles kicker, right? Didn't he? Was it? There was one kicker like this that we were talking about. I can't remember which one because we talked about so many kickers, but that they were on the practice squad somewhere or cut from another team.
Jake Elliott, with the Eagles, was drafted to Cincinnati,
right,
and was beat out in training camp by Randy Bullock.
That's it.
And then Jake goes to Philadelphia and was unbelievable his first couple years there, and has been great ever since. You just never know. Sometimes it's a change of scenery. Was there something there that was uncomfortable? You just never truly know. I know for me, I always felt like I adapted to wherever I was, but that was through a process of controlling the controllables. All I could control was what I could do, and I made the best of every situation I had versus saying, I don't like this, I like that better. You can't do that because that control is out of your hands. You're where they tell you to go. And when you have that, I think that's a mentality of what can I do to adapt my routines to fit this new team's routines or whatever.
It's interesting stuff. We're going to be following Jake and a lot of the folks here through the show. I'm glad we're bringing more kickers on. We're going to bring on more kickers because it's an interesting subject matter to talk about here. But we're going to bring on Jake Grossman after the break of the Michigan Football Analytics podcast. He'll talk hopefully some kicking analytics with us here. And take us through maybe some Michigan Wolverines stuff as well. And the analytics side is a surprise to both Shayne and I. So we're going to hopefully bring them on for that after the break. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM because Shayne's got expertise all over the place, but it's been fun to listen to him in his element with the kicking. So I'm thinking that Jake Grossman, he's our analytics expert, had an analytics podcast and hopefully is back up and running. I'm going to ask him about that. But all things Michigan football and analytics. But I'm curious. So I told Shayne that you'd have some analytics for him, but I don't know what they are. So we're ready for you to present to the class here, Jake. But as you know, on the way in, I got to get your take on the thing of the day. So do you like Nutella? And if you do, what do you like to put it on?
I'm not a Nutella guy, but when I have it, it's pretty good just on toast. I've had a Nutella pizza before, and that was pretty amazing. So I think if I had to have Nutella, that might be where I'd go.
That got a look from Shayne here in studio. Those are two things that he doesn't really have a lot of. It's carbs and sugar all combined and stuff. But I do know what he's talking about. It's like a sweet pizza, and it's going to be actually National Pizza Day, I think, on Monday. So I'm going to bring that up, and it's going to really make Big G mad. But that's for another day here. But I'm curious what you got here, Jake. We'll probably talk about a few things, maybe some Lions contracts if we can. But I figured we'd start with the kicking stuff because we're kind of in the groove right now. We interviewed Jake Moody for the first segment, and we've been talking about kicking pretty much ever since. So I'm curious to hear you guys kind of go back and forth about some of the kicking analytics and metrics that you have, because Shayne was talking about that both in his career and then coaching career, and then now he uses a lot of them for his coaching school as well.
Right. That's so interesting. I did not know Shayne had a coaching school, but that's very interesting because I've always, sort of thrown around the line of like when I have kids someday, I want them to be kickers because I just see it as, something, one, that I'm always been fascinated by, and two, that it seems like for someone who's, doesn't come from, no one in my family is, the size of an offensive lineman, so that always seemed like the most feasible goal. But yeah, so in terms of the analytics I was really focused on the impact of the K-ball rule change and how that's really just changed the entire dimensions in terms of long kicks in the NFL. So yes. I was looking at the frequency of kicks from 55 to 59 and then 60 plus, and I found some really interesting stuff. So I mean, they were 21 attempts this year from 60 plus, and that's 50% more than there's been any other season. But what really blew me away is kickers made those 12% of the time. They made those 57% of the time, and they made 12 of those kicks, which last season had 2024 season had 14 kicks from 60 plus. Before that, there had never even been a season with more than 10 plus kicks from 60, and now we're making 12 in a season. So that really blew me away. I mean, my model that I have for field goal probability, to sort of calculate field goal probability over expected and turn that into kicker, expected points added numbers, and really sort of quantify the impact of of having such a strong kicker. I mean, my model expected 37% of those kicks to get hit. So that gulf right there is just incredible and shows how good these kickers have gotten on the long kicks. But a lot of it can be tied into this rule change with the K balls and how they really can, they have 60 of these balls throughout the season, and they can really prep them, as much as they need. Not, the way they used to back before even Shayne played, where it was, they'd throw them in an oven or inject them with stuff. And
yeah, that was pre-1997 or 98, I think. They were freaking doctoring those things up big time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw something that a team even filled up the ball with helium at one point. So they're not doing that now, but they can, really rough up the surface, increase the sweet spot, and that's really allowed kickers to just go crazy on these long kicks. Now, I did realize that I would have assumed the effect would have also shown in those kicks from 55 to 59, and they did hit, 67% or an expected probability of 56%. So that is a nice, gulf, but it actually isn't more on a per attempt basis. Similar probabilities have existed for the last couple of seasons as kickers have gotten really good from distance, but the attempts did increase. I mean, there were 91 attempts between 55 and 59 this year. That's 14 more than last season, and that last season was also the peak for some of these stats too. So it took what was a gradual sort of increase in the kicker's ability to hit from long range and just added even more to it. So now the kickers have just been incredible. And I think, you could throw some of the increased attempts on the change in the kickoff rules and how, teams don't need to have as long sustained drives to get to field goal range. And, some of those, offenses that aren't as, good from, just sustaining drives are now, having coaches just choose to kick. And that could explain some of it, but I don't think it explains, the percentage hits. I mean, that's just something else.
Well, one thing I've noticed over the years, and this is from before my career, during my career, and after my career, is first off, it's a different caliber of athlete. It used to be the little small soccer player who said, I can kick a football because I can kick a soccer ball. We had generational knowledge growth on, someone who innovated something, perfected it, maybe even found a better way to do it, then taught it to the next generation, and then so on and so on. And there's a little bit of that. There's nutrition, there's strength and conditioning upgrades, and then higher level athletes, and even more of an understanding of sports psychology. Maybe you can throw all those in the little cake batter and still be able to pull out a pretty good cake. But definitely when analytics came into it, that might have changed a few things. And then also the fact that that new ball changed the confidence not only of the kicker telling the coach, hey, let me try this in practice so I can show you I can do it. And then the coach seeing, holy crap, he can do it. And then now they're calling for 60-yard field goals on fourth down in the middle of the first quarter instead of those 60-yard field goals only being like the Hail Mary kicks at the end of the half or the game. And what that's also done is whatever the statistics that have changed on that, it's made punters 40 to 45% punters and 60 to 55% holders is their job title versus a punter because they're punting less and less now because of that.
Right, and actually what I noticed is, and I think this could be something to do with how practice time is allocated, but also just due to maybe changes in the ball, but also notable is at the same time that all this, the kickers got really good, this was the worst season by punter EPA, I mean, in years, actually, the worst of the decade, which I think, even if you control for the weather and the week by a proxy of the week of the season, it's just actually, fallen off from what was actually an increase going into, this season, which suggests that either it's a practice time issue or a focus issue where punters are more focused on this, on their holding job. But it's just such an interesting sort of development alongside the long kicks that the punters have actually not gotten better, but actually their performance in terms of, just gaining field position for teams has actually gotten worse. And yeah, you can definitely also bake in the kickoff rules into that as well, where they're also, a lot of the punters are responsible for doing that. And that also changes how they're spending their practice time. So it's a little bit tough to, disentangle what's causing what here. But I thought that was an interesting development that also caught my eye when looking at all the kicking stats.
That's an interesting one, Jake, because I would think with what Shayne's talking about that they're going from a further distance here with the field goals, that would mean that the punters are starting further back, so you're not having to do the short kicks. So do you think that's a practice issue like Jake's talking about, Shayne, that it's more so, okay, we're not able to focus on this quite as much and get our repetitions in so that we're able to maximize what we do in every situation?
I can promise you there's no head coach or special teams coach that is going to shorten the amount of punt protection practice time, because getting a punt blocked is one of the biggest telltale signs of a momentum and score deficiency of a game. Honestly, what I think it is you're putting punters at awkward distances that they don't know if they should just punt it bombs away or if they should hit the flip-flop pooch type punt. They're getting in these less opportunities, so the if you do the math, whatever you call the subset of data is a smaller amount.
Yeah, the sample size is smaller.
The sample size is smaller, so obviously the increments between higher and lower averages are going to be slightly larger. So one little miscue is going to make it much bigger of a difference than one miscue and then a few good punts where they down it inside the 5 or down it inside the 2 or whatever. I think you throw that into the mix, and then you throw in, you're just not getting as many of those, 40-yard short, 38-yard pooch punts. Yeah, that can control and shorten maybe some of the net averages and some of the regular averages. But when you get in that in-between stage where a punter doesn't know if I'm swinging away or if I'm check swinging, because it's a completely different thing. It's almost like if you're really good with your sand wedge or your pitching wedge, you hit your pitching wedge 140, all right? Or you hit your sand wedge 110. Okay, I'm going to tell you my golf game here. Okay, I hit my sand wedge 110, pretty good. I'm confident, full swing. But now I got to hit 160 yards. Okay, how far do I take my backswing before I start to accelerate through the ball? It's how often do I get to practice that shot? But when you do your full swing, it's over and over and over. It's always the same. It's almost the same no matter what club you use. But when you start having to do those check swings, it's a little bit different and you lose some confidence. The weather can affect it a little bit more. And I think that plays into it because I can promise you, if the team doesn't even give you the same amount of time and team period, the punters over on the other field working on it themselves. They're getting the time in. If anything, maybe gunners aren't making the best play on the ball. I don't know. But I think it's just because they're getting caught in this no man's land of do I crank away at this or do I check swing?
That makes sense because I thought it would be more between the level of aggressiveness that we were talking about earlier in the show and the fact that you are going to kick a field goal from farther back. I thought the starting position would be farther back for punts. I don't know if that's true. Just from the gameplay standpoint, it seems like it would be headed that way more. So that's a good one, Jake. That's a surprising one. Do you have more on that or more stats like that for us?
I don't have specific data on where on punt distance. That's something based on this conversation I'm actually going to look into because I think this is a really interesting issue to try to narrow down and see what's actually going on. I also think that the job of a kicker has an increasingly important job of the kickers and punters are those who are doing these kickoffs because that is now just a huge field position swing to start a drive. If you can nail one of those line drive kicks and really master that. I think we saw this season the teams that were able to sustainably actually get the ball to bounce into the end zone had a lot of success in terms of just controlling the field. So I think that that's something that when I'm iterating on this kicking model in the offseason, I think I'm going to try and incorporate a lot of that and also look at how punting has been affected because I have some raw data on just the averages, but I think Shayne's right to point out that I want to look that we should be looking at the punts from the various distances and see, one, what's the frequency? Are we seeing punters one punt less and two punt less from some of these shorter distances? And maybe that's where a lot of the EPA and value is being added, where they have the short distances, they can easily pin, the ball inside the 20 or even the 10. Whether it's the gunners is an interesting question. I think I need tracking data to look at that, and you can maybe even tie that into the new kickoff rules because they're not doing nearly as many reps of these types of running down the field and trying to track the player as opposed to starting from much closer and trying to navigate the blocker. So it could be a little bit of that as well. But I think it hasn't been enough time to necessarily that the players weren't used to at least the old rules. So I honestly am not sure of the exact answer, and I don't have and if I don't have data to support it, I usually don't like to claim it. But it is a really interesting development, I thought. And it perfectly ties into all this kicking stuff too. I think it's all related in some way. It's just about figuring out exactly how.
So if you're interested, if you want to look this up, there's a thing called a boom rating, and it was developed by I don't know if it was a student, post-grad at Florida Atlantic University, and it basically was a way of measuring the efficiency of a punt versus just measuring distance and averages, because distance and averages don't always play out, to say who's a better punter. Because let's just say he's always having to punt from the 45-yard line. He doesn't have much field to work with. But how many of those yards can he pin the ball so that he can be more efficient with his punt? So this guy created this. It'd be worth looking up. But I think with all of this stuff across the board, I think they all correlate when it comes to the distance that they're punting from, when it comes to the amount of time they may be putting into it, when it comes to, the field position battle after kickoffs, when I think really this is the first year they really started trying to do those line drive kicks. It was when the rule first started, everyone talked about what they were going to do, but almost everybody just kicked it in the end zone, I think, that first year. And
100%. Yeah, that was an odd development too, because that didn't seem like a positive decision from like an expected points perspective.
Yeah, and it was curious because we all talked about it in the kicking world, but no one was doing it in the game. And I think it was a few kickers maybe practiced it a little bit more in the offseason, went to their coaches and said, hey, we should do this because let me show you what I can do. And it kind of became a what club can I pull out of the bag versus, let me just hit my driver out the back of the end zone.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that partially became necessary with the touchback moving from the 30 to the 35, where the coaches said, we can't just let teams start at the 35 as much as they want. And frankly, they should have been saying the same about the 30. I think there were concerns that some had, coaches about, we don't want to risk, a long return or a touchdown. But I also, the frequency of those touchdowns and long returns, I mean, you have to counteract that with the possibility of a fumble on the punt, which actually there were more fumbles on kick returns. I mean, on the kick, not the punt. There were more fumbles on kick returns in 2024 under the old rules than there were touchdowns, which tells you that, there's just a little bit of loss aversion going on where these coaches are more fearful, I think, of something wrong happening than they are the positive momentum that could be generated from forcing a fumble on a kickoff return or just getting in, stopping the team, on the 20 or 25 instead of at the 30.
Exactly. I agree.
I just looked that up, Shayne. It's Evan Jaffe or Jaffe that invented that. That might be a good guess for the show here if we can try to get him. Yeah, I love what you guys are going. That's why I've just been kind of in the background listening here because it's great stuff. And you make a great point, Jake, because you always prepare a lot of data for us before you come on. It's got to be more of a call and response thing with you. Now you've got some homework that you can kind of do some research on, and then we'll have you back on and see what you're able to find, because like you said, a lot of this is ever changing with the new kickoff rules, with the different ways they're handling these different situations. So it's changing year by year. So you're getting new data all the time, but it's great stuff. We appreciate you coming on, and we'll look forward to kind of continuing this conversation here through the off season, because kind of pinpointing some of this stuff and covering it, I think, will be a good ballywick for us on the show here.
Absolutely. I look forward to that.
Well, thanks, Jake. Is there anywhere we can send people? I know your X account. We can send them there, and I put that in the post. But do you have the podcast back going, or is that still kind of on hiatus?
Podcast is on a hiatus. I tried passing it off as sort of once I graduated from Michigan, I wanted to pass it down and, let that platform exist for some of the students that were still there and part of the same group, doing all the sports analytics stuff. And ultimately, I think a lot of them just didn't have the time. So I've been toying around with, figuring out when exactly with, the new job I started and how I can do the podcast. But I am trying to figure out exactly what that will be. In terms of sending people, I also published a website actually yesterday that basically allows you to say which quarterbacks you trust or don't. It's called QBmeter.com. And it just sort of is an interesting thing to play around with in terms of crowdsourcing the idea of, which quarterbacks do people think are the best, which is interesting in the sense of how closely it tracks with numbers like EPA per play and other sort of analytic stats, but also some of the raw stats, and just sort of using the wisdom of the crowd to inform one, the consensus as to, quarterback rankings and which quarterbacks people view as elite versus average versus maybe less than average. And it's just been really interesting to watch all the votes flow in over the last couple of days. So to your audience, if you want to check out QBmeter.com, I'd appreciate and just sort of, continue to see how that all shakes out as people play around with the site.
I did see that before the show. I haven't been able to deep dive into it, but I would encourage people to go there. We'll try to plug it as well, Jake. It's great stuff, and I like that you're continuing to develop this, because that's the part that we try to do on the show too. Is there's always new information to learn, and so the minute you stop learning, you kind of stop developing, and you're at a steady state there. You're not growing yourself. So we appreciate you coming on, and we'll look forward to having you back on here in the future.
Great. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. Thanks, Jake. Take care. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks to Jake Grossman. Good stuff from him there. I think this will be a good recurring segment to do some kicking and punting specialist in general. Maybe there's even a long snapping route. There's probably some data he can pull on that, because Shayne also knows a lot about that. So, but we'll have him back on. We're going to come back here in studio after the break, and then a little later we're going to bring on Evan Sabourin and talk some Lions, some football, some broadcast stuff, a lot of stuff with him. But stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM.
From the GarbarinoRoofs.com studios in Granville.
Country with a twist. Jethro FM, 1530 AM, WYGR, Wyoming, Grand Rapids, 94.9 FM, Grand Rapids, 99.5 FM, Lowell, and Jethro South, 980 AM, WAKV Otsego, Plainwell, 98.9 FM, Otsego, and 105.1 FM, Kalamazoo. Available worldwide at jethro.fm.
I figure we should probably cover the big game that's coming up this weekend here. We've got the Super Bowl coming up, and
who's playing?
Well, there's a couple teams. Well, I was wondering if we wanted to do like a kicker preview version of it too, like if it comes down, because there has been a lot of games that have kind of been coming down to the kickers, as games often do. But we had that snowy game in the AFC Championship. Obviously, that's not going to be an issue for the Super Bowl, given where it's going to be played. But I'm curious, kind of on your takes here, because you've got a former team in there that you used to play for, and they kind of came out of nowhere with Vrabel in charge and a young Drake May. They went from being one of the worst teams in the league as far as draft position and all of that to turning it around quickly. And this seems like more of an old school battle here, Shayne. With you've got kind of more of two defensive teams that are matching up, and more on the team concept rather than some of the maybe offensive piece battles that we've seen in recent years, like, having Mahomes in there, and Mahomes against Hurts, and you've got all the weapons. You've got Barkley. Last year we had Barkley and Kelsey. Not to insult any of the offensive weapons that are in the Super Bowl, but this is more of a defensive-driven Super Bowl, which could mean the kicking maybe is going to be more focused on both field position and the actual field goal kicking, and the matchup between the two kickers here. That could be big for this game, as opposed to kind of we're gonna put all the weight on our running backs and our receivers, whatever. I could see this being a kicking and defense game here.
Well, I remember maybe it was the 2000 Super Bowl, the Ravens, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was the first time that a quarterback got the MVP of the Super Bowl and then got fired the next year. That was Trent Dilfer. Because it was such a defensive game. There was really hardly any offense. In fact, it was a joke that Kyle Richardson should have been the MVP, who was the punter for Baltimore that year. I think he set a record for punts inside the 20 that game. But it plays a big part of it. The specialist, when they get their few opportunities in a low-scoring game, that's when points are a huge advantage to have that. And that's why I think, across the board in the NFL, it might be 3-point change of an average point differential in all games. But I think when we watch Super Bowls and playoff games, we want to see those kind of games. games. We don't want to see a team get blown out. It's just no fun. I don't care if it's your favorite team. It's just not a fun game to watch. So I hope it is a defensive game. I hope there's some big plays that happen, and I hope the kickers get to do their thing, because that's everyone's dream who's a kicker. But I give the advantage of the kickers to Seattle. I think Myers is one. Like, if I could teach a technique and form, he would be the cookie cutter stencil I would put out there.
Interesting. Okay, we haven't talked about him much, which is really emblematic of kind of what's happened with that Seattle team all year. They had kind of a castaway quarterback that went to Minnesota and then kind of reformed his career, and now Sam Darnold's in the Super Bowl. That's obviously a great story that's going on. But I've been talking about this all season, really, that the NFC West has been the best division for a while this year, but we've been focused on the NFC North, some other divisions that we thought might be good. We're really kind of underperforming this year, but the NFC West, between the Rams, the 49ers, and of course the Seahawks, they were dominant, and now we're seeing the Seahawks rise to the top. But Myers, so what is it about him that kind of appeals to you as far as his form? Because there's some good ones in the league. That's no slight to guys like Aubrey and Bates and Jake Moody, all these guys that are very good kickers.
I think for me, it's a matter of efficiency of body control. I mean, when you watch him kick, you might not know anything about kicking, but if you were to just watch a film of him kicking 10 footballs, you would say, wow, he's hardly even trying. His body stays upright. His body doesn't twist and turn and crunch over and create these really inefficient, uncomfortable positions that put a lot of strain on your joints and your spine. It's kind of like, in my opinion, like watching Ted Williams swing a baseball bat. It just looks so efficient. It's like he's barely swinging. How is he hitting that ball so far? And to me, that's what I think makes a guy really good, and obviously performing in the game. But when I teach a technique, I want guys to be able to use the least amount of effort and be as efficient as possible. So that's why I always talk about his form and technique is what I love the most. In fact, I will argue this to my death. There are guys that can kick the ball further and guys that can to make longer kicks, and that if they had his technique, they would be even better. But I call it getting away with. But we've all seen that throughout our entire lives. We've seen athletes that have really awkward-looking, off technical form and technique that are just really good. I mean, there's some guys that swing a baseball bat a little differently than somebody else, but they still crank it. There's guys that shoot free throws a little bit different, but they can still make them. And then there's other guys, they used to teach like elbow forward, flick the wrist, but now you look at guys and their elbows out a little bit more. They've just figured out ways to be really good and efficient with what they do. And I think he's just one of those guys that just has a very clean, efficient swing.
Interesting. That's not who I would have necessarily picked. Obviously, I don't know this stuff, but I don't know that he's a guy that maybe gets the proper amount of shine as a result, but also a guy that's bounced around some too, as we've talked about with some of these other kickers, with yourself and with Jake and some of these other kickers that we've talked about. He kind of had to bounce around and had an interesting beginning. I'm looking at his career history. He was with the San Jose SaberCats, which I didn't even know was a thing, and then the Arizona Rattlers, and then Jacksonville and Seattle. But that's interesting. It took a while for him, and now he's at the top of his game. So maybe it'll come down to a kick from him. That would be an interesting conclusion to the Super Bowl.
I'd love to see it, and I can tell you he would be getting residual endorsements for the rest of his life, because I'm friends with Adam Vinatieri and he is still raking it in. I'll tell you that.
I can believe it. He became synonymous with that kind of stuff.
Well,
and
he had two of them.
And he's now, because it's hard as a kicker to, because as you've talked about, kind of be big name be in the forefront. You're in the forefront when you're kicking, but otherwise you're kind of in the background. But Vinatieri did a good job of kind of getting into the forefront of things especially with his clutch moments. And he played a long time in the NFL.
Very, very long time. I actually train his son, and going up to their house, and he's got 4 Super Bowl trophies in his house. And you think of all the commercials that they used to do. The one where it was an ESPN commercial, I think, and he's going through the metal detector at the airport, and he keeps dinging off the metal detector because he's got so many Super Bowl rings on. And he's like, oh, I always forget about this one. And he puts it in the little tray, and then he goes through and like, oh, there's one around his neck. And he's got another one. And it's like, oh, I always forget about it. And it's like, man, and I know he is still raking it in right now. So if these guys ever get those opportunities, that's what we dream about. So I hope one of them gets it.
It'll be cool to watch. Yeah, I like that preview, the way we did it of the Super Bowl. And that's a huge vote of confidence that he wanted you to coach his son. I didn't realize you were doing that.
Yeah, there's quite a few guys that I train. David Akers, I train his son. And there's a few other guys that want me to. So I'll say that is a huge honor. I'm very flattered by that. But also sometimes I think what happens is, it's dad. And, like sometimes you just don't want to listen to dad. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But I think they like that I have a different vernacular sometimes than maybe what they say and just a different perspective. But it works out well, and I enjoy it.
Well, it's a testament to what you've put together with your coaching program and school, that you've learned a lot and been able to codify it, make it into a school. And I'm sure they're learning things from their dad. But yeah, it is different. It's hard to have your dad as your coach. Sometimes you can get away with that as like little league and stuff. But even that, I had my dad and my stepdad as my baseball coaches when I was young, and that was. Well, it went better than you'd expect, I guess. But yeah. So no, it's a big vote of confidence that people are doing that with you here. But we're gonna let you go, Shayne. I know you got to get out of here. We're looking forward to next week. We'll be coming back to it next week. We'll review the Super Bowl. Maybe we'll have some kicking stuff to review then. But yeah, we appreciate this was a great episode. I love how kicking heavy it was here, and we'll keep doing this stuff because it's great metrics, and it's a great way to get the average fan to understand this a little bit better, because it just shows how deep this subject matter is.
Yes.
So yeah, we'll let Shayne get out of here, but we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back with Evan Sabourin and talk some broadcast, Lions, a bunch of stuff. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. But little did I know, he has a very extensive history in TV and broadcasting, and he's done some stuff with the Lions. And so we wanted to bring him on the football show here and talk with him about a bunch of things. I think we'll talk some about broadcasting and radio in general, because he made some interesting observations about kind of aggregation and things like that. But this is Evan Sabourin. You heard him on Monday on Sports Intel, and he worked on the original DirecTV Red Zone as a producer. He's worked for Rich Eisen and Dan Patrick. So it's a who's who. So we appreciate you slumming it here with no-name Ryan Walsh on Jethro FM here, Evan.
Oh, I'm happy to join you guys. You guys are great, man. No food questions for me today, though. I was hoping I'm still thinking about those mashed potatoes we talked about earlier this week.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because that was going to be I had to make sure to get all the plugs in for you. But the food of the day, the thing of the day, it's usually food. It's also Optimist Day, so we're trying to be optimistic here on the show. But that's every day for me. I try to be optimistic. But it's National Nutella Day, so I'm wondering if you have a favorite thing that you like to put Nutella on, if you even like it.
You know what? I'll be honest with you. I've never had Nutella. I've never tried it. I've never had it.
Interesting. See, we were talking about that. Shayne just had to go, but when we were talking about it in the first segment, I always ask him these questions, and he's a premier athlete, and he's in very good shape. He eats very healthy. It's mostly protein. He was talking about how he eats 8 to 10 eggs a day in that segment, and then I'm asking him if he likes corn chips and Nutella. But he was talking about how he, I guess, was exposed to it in his time in Canada, and that was the same way with me when I lived in Spain. I was exposed to Nutella, so it's kind of come on strong here since then, but it wasn't a regular thing. We're more used to the peanut butter kind of stuff, but yeah, you got the potato one, so it's 50-50. Nutella is very specific. It was hard to make that into something more broad than it is unless you actually like it. But
yeah, I know what it is. I've never tried it, and now I'm curious. Well, that might be something on my to-do list this week.
I wouldn't put it on potatoes to pull it back to the tater tot discussion on Monday, but yeah, something on the sweeter side. It goes well with one of our previous guests was talking about putting it on pancakes. They've been doing it more with breakfast food. That's what Jeff said. He has it that way. So yeah, something like that in the morning. But no, we're appreciative of the fact that you can come back on here because yeah, you've got a really interesting background, and I think I'm going to start with the red zone because that's been a phenomenon, and you were in it at the beginning. So I'm just curious kind of the evolution of it, and when you started with the red zone, if you could have foreseen what it's become, because now you have sickos like me that have the quad box on YouTube TV, yeah. And then I have Red Zone as one of the entries on there, and then it goes into the Octabox now, and I've got 11 boxes on my screen. I'm not even taking anything in at that point. I'm sitting there eating Nutella on my couch and not taking anything in, and but it's fun while it lasted. It's like as I usually say, it's like snorting football.
Oh yeah. I think, I started in the original Red Zone. Now, there's two Red Zone channels, or there were two Red Zone channels. The first one started in 2005, and that was the one that I was a part of. It was the DirecTV version with Andrew Siciliano. And then years later, the NFL Network took on their own Red Zone, the one with Scott Hansen, but they're basically the same show. You're going back and forth through games so everyone can watch. I think when it first started, there was only a couple of us that really, took it off from the beginning. And it was, you around that time, the early 2000s, late 90s is when fantasy football really started to take off. Everybody nowadays has got their own fantasy team. People who don't even know anything about football have got their own fantasy team, and they're drafting. It's become a phenomenon. It's something, it's a water cooler talk thing. It's something everyone's always chatting about or texting about. Who should I start, this or that? And I think that's where Red Zone really, made its impact, because you can watch your one game. I never really watched the show as much other than working on it. But like when I was on my days off, like I'm sitting there and I'm watching the entire Lions game. But for those people that really are into fantasy and looking at and wanting to go to all the games and seeing, hey, this guy scored, my guy scored, and that's kind of it's what made it take off. And it's almost like it's also really bad for people with attention deficit disorder like myself, because you're going from game to game to game to game. But you can also see how it makes it more interesting for just the overall watch experience of football. So at the time, no, we weren't sure how it would be, but man, it took off big and it took off fast. And Andrew Siciliano, I don't know if you're familiar with him. I believe he's the voice of the Cleveland Browns now, but he was an NFL Network talent and host here for many years, and he was amazing. He was really good. And we always say that this was the original one, and then the NFL Network ended up replicating it with Scott Hansen, which is what you see now modern day. But the original Red Zone from DirecTV you got with your NFL Sunday Ticket package, I think you had to upgrade to like the premium or something, I believe. And it was really good. People really, really loved it. Andrew was a great host. He was great at segueing in between games, giving you stats, highlights. It lasted for about, I want to say 15, 16, 17, 18 years, somewhere around that part. I stopped working on it in 2020, but then it went for a few more years, so I'm not exactly sure about the number. But it evolved into, we ended up doing a Fantasy Zone channel, which was also part of your upgrading your package on Sunday Ticket, where it was the same kind of show, but it was more focused on fantasy relevance. So it's like, hey, you got 6 points here, or hey, here's the top performers today in standard scoring leagues and stuff. Because the fantasy industry is it's a multi-billion-dollar industry nowadays. It is a huge, huge thing, and not just in football. You've got baseball, basketball, hockey. I'll embarrass myself on your show right now, Ryan. I've been doing fantasy hockey for over 25 years. It's big business. I mean, you've got television shows, podcasts, everywhere dedicated to the fantasy aspects of sports, and I think that's Red Zone was one of those things that kind of helped that the fantasy world kind of evolve for people.
Well, that's a good bona fide for the Flying Octopus podcast, though, that you've been doing it for 25 years. That's a bona fide right there. I've never played fantasy hockey. I'm trying to listen to guys like you and Devin and Tony so that I can understand the Wings more. This is the first season that I've seen all the games in a long time, since they were kind of in their heyday when I was younger. But I've kind of retired from fantasy. It's a little too much for me. I like, because it does change the game. It changes the way you watch things, and Red Zone is, I guess, emblematic of that to a degree, where you and that's more of the cause, I guess, like you said, kind of causation more than correlation to a degree, where you were able to kind of push that fantasy stuff forward because they were seeing all the touchdowns, they were seeing all the teams in the red zone. And I would think the one that you're not mentioning, that now no longer has to be a whispered secret on the broadcast for this stuff because it sponsors everything, is the gambling element to it, because I'm sure that kind of you rode the fantasy wave, and then now it's the gambling wave combined with the fantasy wave, which combined are basically like one of the biggest industries we have.
Yeah, and that's just going down a whole other wormhole of what the industry has become. You know, you'll watch on SportsCenter players suspended for gambling, and then right after they'll say, "Well, this segment was brought to you by DraftKings." It's a different world. It's definitely a different world. I think I'm old enough to have been through all aspects of it. Gambling is it's a slippery slope to go down in the sports industry, as we've seen across the board in all sports, whether it's athletes, coaches, whatever, players getting in trouble, point shaving, all that. So I am concerned a little bit about the direction of sports as a whole with the whole gambling, the process moving forward. So it's definitely going to be interesting. But yes, you're definitely correct in saying that gambling has, now that it's become a little more legalized in a lot of states, that it definitely has a huge impact on the way we watch sports today.
Yeah, this is a good show to talk about it in that way, because you're absolutely right. You can't really talk about it objectively in podcasts and TV shows, whatever, the sporting events. They're all sponsored by that. There's a lot of podcasts that try to talk about gambling, and then they say, "Oh, brought to you by DraftKings or FanDuel," and you can't talk about it properly. One of the only segments we've done on gambling was a friend of mine that is basically a legal expert that helped in bringing sports gambling to Michigan. He was an advisor on how to actually get the legalities down. And I brought him on and had a very in-depth conversation about how all this stuff works in the different states and the possible pitfalls with it. So we're not going to get sponsored by DraftKings anytime soon. And I wouldn't accept the sponsorship anyways. So it's because it can be very dangerous. It can, it does have a lot of harm that's associated with it, with the addiction to it and all of that. And I just like the purity of the game. I like watching the game. I don't want to care if somebody scores the first touchdown or if somebody hits a certain amount of yards, or that's too much for me to manage. I'd just rather watch my teams and then also watch the other games for just the beauty of the game and not have to have rooting interests that are strange, where I need the tight end to catch 35 yards in that game to get the payout.
Yeah, but I know, and I totally agree with you there, and I am exactly the same way. But a lot of people aren't.
Oh yeah,
and you have a lot of friends who you're at a party, you're at a dinner, and they're on their phones with FanDuel, and they've got 3-leg parlays, and you can do all that now, and it's almost like it's an addiction, for the people. I know it is an addiction, but it's something like I just don't know how this is going to progress into something that you can say is really going to be good, not only for the sport, but good for, individuals who get into this kind of behavior. It's definitely something dangerous, a dangerous path I think we're going down. And, we could take this into a whole nother wormhole now. When you think about, NIL these days, now college athletes are getting paid. It's a much different world that we live in, even from like 10 to 15 years ago with the way that sports and how they're going about making money nowadays.
But we'll come back with Evan Sabourin and talk some more broadcasting and football. Stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. One that I've been wanting to cover for a while, and I think Evan is a good candidate to do this. I've been trying to kind of tell people, especially since we have a more local show. This one is a little bit more expanded now that we have Shayne on there, and we try to cover more football topics because he's got such an expansive knowledge base and he's got connections all around the league and all that. But we're still Michigan based, and we try to emphasize, like, hey, we bring guys on like Evan and Tony Wolak and Devin Little, and we bring people on that actually cover the local stuff, because as soon as you start going to the national scene, you're going to get into things that are aggregated and just farmed for engagement. And you kind of made a reference to that for the national shows. Although I will say that the national shows that you worked on in the Dan Patrick show and the Rich Eisen show, they're much more focused. They seem to be less like that. I'm thinking more Colin Cowherd with things like that. But with Eisen and Patrick, they're more interview based and they're more thoughtful, at least. But I'm curious about your experience on both of those shows and just in the industry in general.
Yeah, like I said, man, the industry is always changing, and we're getting into a different aspect. We're going into a new era of the industry, especially when you start thinking about with what AI can do nowadays. But the Dan Patrick show was running for about 6 or 7 years as a radio show before DirecTV picked it up in 2009 to broadcast it. And that was one of the first shows that you actually saw that kind of went with that business model. And nowadays you see everything there. You see the Pat McAfee show, the Rich Eisen show evolved through the Dan Patrick show at DirecTV on the Audience Network. It's the way we consume our media nowadays. It's different. Now we're midway through the podcast era too. Everyone's got a podcast now. How many podcasts were out 10, 15 years ago? Not many. Now how many podcasts are out today? I think the pandemic contributed a lot to that. But it's a different business model that everyone's adapting, and it's kind of crazy to see how media started. You went from your sports centers, those shows, but now people can consume media from, anywhere. I mean, you go on YouTube, how many different shows will you find on there to watch? On our podcast, we put it out on Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, but we also, we do, there's a video aspect that you have to put out, and that helps you reach, on all these different platforms to try to engage people. It's about followers and likes and clicks and all that nowadays. Whereas back in the day, when I started in this industry, I started back in 1998 at WXYZ there in Detroit with Don Shayne and Dave Llewellyn. And from where I was then, as a young kid, actually still in college, to where I am now, approaching 50 years old with a family, just the turnover and what you see in the industry, things are different. As I said, the way we consume media, just the different kinds of media. Back when we were younger, it was, hey, I want to get my sports highlights tonight. Well, I'm going to tune into Rich Eisen and Stuart Scott for SportsCenter. And nowadays, I mean, you can go to 100 different places to get your sports information. And now with like podcasts, even such as mine, Dating on the Red Wings, it's more centralized, more specialized. That I I don't need to see what's going on nationally. I want to know what's going on with my Red Wings. So, if there's 5 or 6, 7, probably more Red Wings podcasts out there. Detroit Lions. You want to talk about the Detroit Lions? There's just as many, or probably more. And it's just a different business model. And I think part of the way this industry is kind of, I'm not going to say struggling, but I think there's still people are kind of trying to still figure out and navigate their way of what is the business model moving forward for the next decade, because it's continually evolving. There's just always different things that are coming out, shows, tweets, podcasts, whatever, and it's just a different ball game. And it's at my age, and trying to learn to adapt. What's the next best thing, or what's the kind of shows that you want to put out there that will gain attention, because there's just so many options now. Anyone can start a podcast. Anyone can start their own YouTube show. That's what the difference is with technology nowadays. It's a whole different ballgame.
Exactly. And that's why it's a good discussion point, especially for a show like ours and a station like ours, our station owners building out a sports lineup. But his whole goal, the model here is very different. It's less focused on, sure, we want listeners and all of that and to provide a good product, but it's not necessarily focused on engagement and that sort of business model that typifies the industry, which is why we can make different shows. That's why my show is different. That's why I always go to the local markets. You mentioned all those podcasts and writers and stuff that are in the local markets. That's why we have a whole Rolodex of guys that cover the Red Wings for us, cover the Lions, cover the Pistons, and highlight their outfits, because what always astounds me is you have a lot of people that listen to your guys' podcast, that read Tony and Devin on the Hockey Writers and do all of that stuff, but they don't even look at the byline. They don't even look at who it is. They don't even know the names, and so that's why we try to feature a lot of those folks on the show, because there's they like the content and everything, but they should know whose article they're reading. They should know who in the local market is supplying this, because it's not, you can watch the national stuff, like you said, if you want entertainment and get an idea of the national scene and what's trending and all of that'll give you that, and you can listen to the personalities that you like the best. But really, if you want information on the local scene, you have to go to the local folks that are covering it, like you guys and a lot of the other folks that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's oversaturation. I mean, it's definitely what it is. And some things, some successful podcasters, I don't want to use their names, but who I've talked to about how I build our podcast and how I make it better. And the thing that you have to really do, like, to stand out, and I've been told this from many of these people, is that you got to figure out what's different. What are you doing that's different from this person or that person? How do you stand out compared to this podcast or this show? Like I said, the formulas are continually evolving about how you get engagement, because that's, like I said, that's what it's about, is engagement, clicks, likes. That's what's, if this is what you're doing it for. If you're doing it to get sponsorship, because setting up a podcast or doing a show on YouTube or whatever, like, it's not cheap. There is financial obligations to kind of put a good product out there. So it's trying to differentiate and trying to do something that other people aren't doing. But again, there's so many people doing it. The competition, it's cutthroat, because there's just so many people. Everybody wants to talk sports. Everybody wants to have their own show, whether it's sports or fitness or modeling or talk shows. Everybody wants to do that. And like I said earlier, with the way technology is going today, anyone can do that if they want to. And that's where I think you're going to get just oversaturated in the market, not just in sports, but in any kind of talk show format or what I'm talking about. But it's getting crazy. It's getting crazy, and it's a very difficult thing to do. When we started putting this podcast together, it's I figured, this would be easy. Guys like me and Tony and Devin, we watched the Red Wings our whole lives, we know everything about it. But it is a tough business to get into, and it's definitely even a tougher business to find a moderate to really to be really successful.
Exactly. And but I can guarantee, Evan, talk about differentiation. We're the only show that combined kicking analytics with talking about Nutella with every guest. So there you go. There's
Don't forget the mashed potatoes.
Yeah, exactly. That was Monday. So we got something unique for the audience. But no, it's a good conversation to have for sure. And I like that we're informing people on how this stuff works. So really appreciate coming on. We didn't even cover any Lions this show, by the way. So thankfully there wasn't too much going on this week as far as we covered some of the Petsing stuff and other stuff last week, but we'll definitely have you back on to cover more of that and cover more of this broadcast stuff, because I think this is interesting stuff as kind of an expert in the industry here. So we'll definitely look forward to having you back on both shows. But tell the people where they can follow you for all of this stuff, for the Flying Octopus podcast and all of the great stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, you can follow me at Twitter at Sabourin91, Saber91. I don't even know how to say my own name anymore. That's tied to the Flying Octopus podcast. At Flying Octopod is where you can find me, Tony, and Devin. We do a weekly show, putting out a lot of tweets, stats, info, news. You can also follow us on our YouTube channel at The Flying Octopod, where, as I just said, we broadcast as well as we put out the audio format. And, again, this is something that we're just very passionate about. And yes, we want it to take off and get likes, but at the end of the day, we're three guys who've, followed hockey our whole lives, and we love talking Red Wings hockey and what the future holds. And it's been a pretty exciting season so far with the Red Wings' success up to this point heading to the Olympic break. So, give us a listen, man. Yeah, we love talking hockey.
Definitely, it's great stuff, and we have Tony and Devin on the show as well. We're waiting on Tony here, that we haven't had him on yet this season with his new addition to his family. So we're waiting on him after the
little Quinn Wolak. So he's been pretty busy.
Definitely, yeah. So we gave him he requested to come on after the trade deadline. So we'll talk to him after that. But be sure to give them a listen and a follow, and be sure to keep an eye on Evan. He's doing some great stuff, and we'll make sure to have you on both shows in the future. But really appreciate you coming on, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Evan. Talk to you soon. Thanks to he said his name both ways, so now I'm confused. It's either Evan Sabourin or Sabourin. I'm not sure of the emphasis there, Jeff.
I heard Sabourin 91.
Yeah, but he said Sabourin too. Yeah, so he said it both ways. So hey,
if he doesn't know, we won't get in trouble for not knowing.
Exactly. Right? So just be sure to follow him. It's spelled SAB, the first part. That's that much we know. We put it on our post. But we're going to take a quick break, and then Jeff and I will close up the show after the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. I want to thank our guests too. Great lineup of guests. Shayne had some great stuff going with both Jake Moody and Jake Grossman. I did joke that I wanted to bump Evan just so we could have a third Jake, but I don't know that I had a third Jake in the works there. But it was already confusing with two of them. But great stuff from both of them, from all three of them. We'll definitely be having Evan and Jake Grossman back and Jake Moody back. Hopefully, schedule pending. He's got some busy stuff going. Hopefully, he'll have a nice long career. But fun stuff there. Be sure to tune in to the rest of the Jethro lineup, featuring none other than Jeff Isaac, who's producing here. He's got his show coming up. That's 7 to 9, right?
7 to midnight.
7 to midnight. See, that's why I wanted to check the time, because I always say 7 to 9. I'm shortening you there. I'm used to the sports lineup where we're 7 to 9. 7 to midnight. You got to get all those requests in.
That's right. Lots of requests last week. It was great. Had a lot of fun.
So be sure to tune in to him. We've got one of our other producers, MLB Mike, who does the Polka Pops. We got that during the day before Jeff's show. Make sure to tune in to the Sports Project, our original sports radio host and show, 10 to 12 on Saturday, and then 7 to 9 on Wednesday night. Be sure to tune into Sports Intel with me, Ryan Walsh, 7 to 9 on Monday. And then, Shayne will be back in studio. We've got a couple good guests playing. We've got Ken Fantetti of Lions fame here that will be coming on for the interview segment, and then we'll be covering some well, for those that missed the Lions coverage, although it was a good show with all the information we had on the kicking. We're going to be talking to Mike Kimber next week on the Lions offseason situation. But what do you got on this game this weekend here, Jeff? What are you thinking with the Super Bowl upcoming?
Everybody's trying to talk themselves into the Patriots winning, but I just don't see it happening between Seattle's defense, and I trust Sam Darnold, and I'm really rooting for Sam Darnold. Everything that man has been through in his early years with the Jets and Carolina, if he gets a ring, I just think it would be fantastic. So I'm going Seattle. I think late it's going to be 10 to 13 point victory. That's just me. Maybe 27-17, 23-13, something like that.
The Patriots, I think a lot of it's going to depend on the game script if they're able to stay in it. I don't know how many games these people are watching that they think they're going to win, and obviously a lot of their fans are hoping for that. But I've seen a decent amount of Patriots games, and they really have to eke games out. Like May has been great. He's an MVP candidate. He should be. He probably won't win the MVP, but he should be a candidate. But late in the season, it's been a lot of grinding out games where he's having to make kind of runs on 3rd and long and things like that, where Sam Darnold, I think, gets unnecessary heat because of his history, where in Minnesota they kind of looked at it as him fading down the stretch a little bit. Obviously, he has the history with the Jets where he was quote unquote seeing ghosts and all of that. But I think he's primed and ready, and he's a perfect fit for this team, and they're dominant really at all phases of the ball. And so there's no reprieve for any team that's playing against him.
And if you're doubting Sam Darnold, go back and watch the NFC Championship game, because he was unbelievable in that game.
Yeah, as opposed to fading, he's peaking at the right time. So it'll be fun to watch, but tune in to us next week, and thanks for kicking it with us, and have a great week.